Chad Dunn, welcome to the Victory Degree podcast.
Nick, thank you for having me on.
Chad, if someone has just clicked on this and they have no idea who you are, your story, anything about you, why do you think they should stick around and listen to what you have to say?
Well, I know people should stick around and hear what I have to say because this is a life of transformation, whether you're going through transforming from a young youth athlete to a professional athlete. If you're a coach that's getting into the field and you want to transpire to become somebody greater in a college, a professional sports trainer, the process of doing that. At the same time, as somebody that wants to transform to just be into a business owner, So I've got a lot of stuff that I put out there about business, life, and sports. And it all starts with having codes. I'll give you the codes of what you need to do to be able to conquer your own life.
I want to get into some of those codes, but I do have to ask, because in doing research for this podcast, I noticed that you are a proud father of an English Bulldog. So I feel like it'd be fitting to ask you, why are English Bulldogs the best breed out there? Because I also have an English Bulldog.
Okay, I've had 7. So it's the only dog that I have. I do have an English Mastiff right now. So English Bulldogs. I had a buddy, Johnny K, who used to be a golfer. His caddy, my buddy Richie Cornelia. I went over to his house and he had Picasso. And Picasso was just beast of a Bulldog. You've always seen him growing up, as a kid. You always see him on the TV commercials, but I'd never seen him in person. That was the first time I saw one. So with that, over the last, 20 years, I've had 7 Bulldogs. Currently just had to put one of my females down about 6 months ago. So I've got one left now, Hurley. But they're beasts, man. Their personalities change, they're the best ones out there, the best animals out there.
It's funny because I don't think a lot of people realize, I guess, like how moody they can be, or just like dramatic, almost stubborn. In a sense, stubborn.
Yep.
Like people just envision bulldogs, which rightly so. Like they're lazy, they sleep a ton, they drool, like all the things that you've seen on TV. But they have a personality. They have a feisty personality.
They do. There was a thing I was listening to. It was a gentleman I was listening to a couple of months ago, and they were talking about Winston Churchill, and he had a bulldog and the whole thing with him. And they still a fallacy. Some people say it's a fallacy. Some people say it was true. But they always ask Winston, they said, well, how come anytime you go into these meetings, you have your bulldog with you? And he said, you know what? The way that the bulldog's mouth is with the underbite on the bottom, they're the only dog, one of the only breeds of the dogs that can lock onto something and never let go. They can still breathe. So all the dogs with the longer snout, the nose, the nostril gets clogged up and they have to take the breath off and so they can breathe. They said the bulldog has the nose down and so they can still continue to breathe. So it's almost just like with life, right? The bulldogs, they can be able to lock onto something and never let go.
I never thought about that. That's interesting. No. I also completely forgot that Winston Churchill had a bulldog, but you're right.
Yeah. So the similarities of it all, kind of cool.
Isn't it kind of crazy? I was laughing about this with maybe my brother or a friend. I can't remember who, but because English Bulldogs were bred to like corral bulls, right? Like, am I getting that right? Like that was like the history of the breed. Yep. But now, like you look at them and you could, never imagine, at least with my English Bulldog, I'm like, dude, he walks like 10 steps outside. Granted, I do live in the Florida summer. So listen, I walk 10 steps outside and I get pretty tired. So I get it. But yeah, dude, he walks 10 steps and he's dead. So I can't imagine them trying to corral a bull.
So my guy Hurley that I have right now. So all of my dog, my first one, obviously I had was Lucy. Then after that, we had Volcom. I have Stussy, and now I have Hurley left. So they're all named after surf companies, right? Obviously, I love the surf, skateboard, BMX, the extreme sports. So Hurley, my bulldog that I have now, this dude swims 10 hours a day. Like right now, he'll be in the pool by himself, and he'll swim up and down all day long. He does not have any qualms about swimming water. We can't keep him out of the pool. He's in the pool all day long. Right? It's very strange to see a bulldog that swims. I got 2 of them.
That is very strange. Yeah. I always joke around with my parents. I'm like, dude, if we put our bulldog in the pool, he would just sink like a rock straight to the bottom.
My female, when she swims like a buoy, you know what I mean? She swims up and down just because they're so top heavy. But my dude Hurley, he swims better than Michael Phelps, right? He probably get trained by Mr. Hawk or whatever that was on your last show, right?
Yeah, right. Oh man, that's awesome. We could do a whole podcast on the English Bulldogs.
Yeah, I love the Bulldogs. I love the Bulldogs.
Chad, I do want to get to your story and your journey though, because I think, one thing that I always try to do that I'm currently trying with this podcast is to really highlight the stories and journeys of various people, athletes. I like to stick to sports and business; those are kind of my 2 fields of interest, but. You're kind of in between all of that. Like you were an athlete at one point, then you went through this tough period of your life and now you've kind of reinvented yourself, and you're almost like a phoenix born again, and you're doing this awesome thing with the Human Performance Center, with Move, the Human Performance Center. So you've been through like all these ups and downs, but I figured maybe for this it'd be best if we start at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about your childhood, and what do we as the audience need to understand about your upbringing to understand who you are today?
You know, everybody always the BMX. I hear a bunch of stuff about BMX. And I did grow up racing BMX bikes. I started when I was 6 years old. For me, that was just the early part of my identity, my self-identity. I grew up as an athlete. My dad was a bull rider. I've mentioned this on a couple of the other podcasts. So I've got the hard life. I've got the DNA for fear and adventure in my body. The more adrenaline, the better it is for me. So again, perfectly for my 6-year-old birthday, my mom and dad, they got me a bike. Went out to the local BMX track, loved it. I had fun. And that's what I did as a youth. I rode my bike everywhere, something you don't see with the kids nowadays. We're jumping over fences, putting wood up on blocks or whatever we could do to make jumps. And just, it's the X Games. We were doing the X Games in the 1980s. I'm 51 years old right now. So in the early 80s was when all this stuff was kind of coming around. But BMX wasn't my main thing. I was good at it. And then, I competed at a high level. But it was just being an athlete. I got into football when I got into high school. I was 5'2", 125 pounds. So I love football. My dad played football. Went to Colorado State when he got done doing all the bull riding and the ranch life. Matter of fact, like I said, he was first playing college. He went against me, Joe Green. My dad was a fullback. Me, Joe Green was coming off the edge, right? So he tells me, as a kid, you never think about it, but now, you're thinking about, Mark Gastineau or any of those other guys that are out there. Somebody that we grew up and that we've watched play. So, the history was there just to be an athlete. Problem was I was 5'2" and 125 pounds. I used to get my dick knocked in the dirt, So I went from being a BMX athlete, and I changed my identity. Now I was a football player. I played Pop Warner. We won on the Pop Warner levels. But then I got into high school. Now you're with the big boys, I ended up losing. So I went home one day. I'm not used to sitting on the bench or sitting on the sideline. I like to be a starter. I like to be a player, somebody that contributes, sacrifices my body out there. And when I was a backup quarterback due to the size and everything else, I went home and I said, man, Dad, I don't know if I can do this. He said, well, why don't you start wrestling? Now you can go mano-a-mano against somebody your own weight and everything else. Again, the whole thing, I don't want to wrestle with sweaty men and roll around in a singlet. That all kind of came to play. But then he's like, Chad, you can physically beat the shit out of somebody without getting in trouble. So that was my next identity, right? I went as a wrestler, wrestled for the 2-3 years. Senior year, I did get hurt and had to go to therapy. Just like everybody else's story, I'm another one. I went to physical therapy and boom, here I am. I've got a therapy, right? So the sports of being an athlete early on set me up for my future. I'm not one of those guys that lives in my football moments or my BMX moments or my wrestling moments. Those were great childhood memories. I had a great childhood. My mom and dad drove me everywhere. My sister's currently still racing. She's 54 and she still races BMX bikes, she's the Tom Brady, right? She don't know when to let go. I knew when it was my time to get out. So again, my foundations in sports of being an athlete, really what it did is it set me up for my future with what I'm doing right now.
Well, when you say it set you up for your future, like in terms of like how to work hard, like what are some of the principles and values that you think it taught you?
I think one of the biggest things, obviously, with the hard work was the one thing, being around athletics and health was the second thing, so I'm going to work hard to do what I have to do. I went to ASU and I was doing exercise science, Spanish. I was also doing a minor in Spanish. I had a buddy that was working down in Mexico City. So those are my two major studies when I was at ASU. And I was one of those kids, like when you go to college, or you're going to college, what do you want to do? I want to do physical therapy and speak Spanish. I knew exactly what it was that I wanted to do. So that's when it kind of set me up for my future, So here I am. I went to ASU, started doing all my exercise science classes, my biomechanics, all my undergrad studies, so that way here I can hopefully see what my future was going to take, maybe possibly some PT school or whatever I chose to do after that.
So let me just set up the timeline here a little bit. So
Yep.
BMX, football, wrestling in high school.
Yep.
Did any of those transfer to college, or were you just solely focused on studies? Okay.
My senior year in high school, we didn't play football. Like I said, I played my freshman, sophomore year. Wrestled. I wrestled my freshman through my senior year. Got hurt my senior year, so that was when I didn't wrestle that season. So we started throwing the parties before the football games, though, right? We were the guys that had the house parties, whatever. Let's have a fun time, get everybody all jazzed up before we go. that was good then, but then when I got into college, that partying took over a little bit. So that's where, my next life, I still had a detailed plan. I had a perfect goal lined up. I just got a little taste of college, which everybody else does too. Some, not everybody, but some people do.
Yeah, it's tough, especially if you come from like a certain upbringing or just the city that you live in. If it's on the quieter side, then you get to college and you're like, oh, there's parties, there's girls. Like it's
ASU was the top 5 party school at that time when I went
yeah.
there. There was parties, girls, and everything in between. Yep, yep.
So do you think that? So did you lose focus during that period of time? Like you mentioned, like the little transformation that you went through.
Sure.
Like what kind of detail what that was?
Yeah, well, when I got to college, everything was good. Obviously, like I said, sports was fun. We competed. Even the competition side of it all. We asked. We had one of our marketing people. He was here, and we asked our athletes that were down here, specifically Carrick Felix, one guy used to play for ASU, Sun Devils basketball, played a little bit in the league. If somebody ever asks you, why are you an athlete? And that was a question that we asked a lot of our people down here. And nobody really could. They said, well, I like the competition. Well, can't you compete in life? Do you have to be an athlete to compete? I like to win. Okay, well, can't you win at life? You don't have to be an athlete or play a sport to win. So Carrick, he said it was the only time that he could chase something that was positive. Right? So I thought that was a good answer. So why was I an athlete? Well, I think again that athlete was what got me to be competitive, to be the hard worker, to show up, and have that work ethic. Even we were throwing these parties, we were still competing. We had the bigger parties, right? So now when I got to college, everything was good. I got a job as a fitness instructor. I'm in the field, doing well. One of the ladies that was at the health club, she's like, I think you'd be very good in the therapy community as well. So she got me a job working with her at this place called Arizona Sports Physical Therapy. That was my first job that I had when I was doing the physical therapy aspects or the sports performance aspects of it. Well, we kind of had everybody in together. Cool as can be. First day on the job, I had this guy, Walter Zangas, who was a World Cup goalie, came in town from Italy to do his ACL recovery. Gary Derscheid was the therapist I worked with, and he was a therapist at Ohio State University before coming out here and opening up his own practice. So I was around great professionals, and I was around great mentors. And again, I was around great athletes. My first day on the job, man, I knew this was my calling. I wanted to be able to help people. And so I started my route, early college, my freshman year, sophomore year, I was working. But at the same time, I was also partying. I got a couple DUIs, right? Just made bad choices, with all it was. Went out and was partying with athletes that we met underage and different things. So I lived the life of both. I lived the life of learning, and I also lived the life of partying. I tried to juggle both of them as best as I could.
I wanted to touch on something you mentioned. I really like that question. Why are you an athlete? And I feel like that question could be applied to anything. Like, why are you a podcaster? Why are you a CEO? Why are you? And I think it kind of gets at something that I've been thinking a lot about, is this idea of being more intentional with your life. And I actually mentioned this during one of my live streams last week. I think a lot of people struggle with intentionality. So, and it could be something as simple as the city that they live in. It's like, why do you live in Orlando, Florida? Why do you not live in New York? Why do you not live in Los Angeles? And I think a lot of people, don't spend the time to actually think about some of the decisions that they make, but some of these decisions impact the rest of their lives, where they live, what they do for work, who they marry. So just this idea of being more intentional. And I've caught myself too, like it could be something as simple as like, oh, I'm going to go eat a sandwich today. It's like, okay, so like why a sandwich? Like, why not have maybe a salad, something healthier? Like just being more intentional about the things that we do. And even like in terms of how I spend my time, it's like, all right, why are you on TikTok right now? Why are you watching YouTube videos? You could be doing this. You could be doing something that's maybe a little more productive. So I don't know if you've maybe felt that kind of in your own experience, just being more intentional with some of your actions.
Well, no, and that's my chapter 2 in my book, right? Chapter two is called Yes or No. It's all about choices, right? But we have conscious choices, we have subconscious, and we have unconscious choices that we make. And so at that point in time, and it could be, it's in athletics as well. You know what I mean? We get so used to doing the same thing over and over and over again. We go on autopilot and we just do what the body does, but we don't have that time to stop and think. That's kind of what was led me down this path of destruction as well. So when you talked about the overall intentions, chapter 1 that I have is built off of self-identity. Really what it's all about is a self-reflection, right? Is that we have to look at ourselves, especially nowadays, because we're in the comparison mode. We're trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're trying to get the followers. We're trying to do these certain things, but at the end of the day, is that everybody lose sight of who they are. I've asked the question to all my athletes here since I've kind of getting ready to do this book launch and everything else. But I've asked a lot of people here. There's this typical question that most people can always ask, or that people ask, but people can't answer. And that question is, so tell me a little something about yourself. People will tell you what they do. They'll tell you where they're from, but they will not tell you about themselves. A, because they don't know. B, because they're embarrassed, right? Or they don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, or they might not fit in with it all. But nobody really wants to honestly tell them who they are, And so the first thing that you have to do is you have to come back to self-identity. You have to know who you are. Then you have to start making those choices and make sure that they're conscious choices that you make instead of the unconscious or subconscious choices that will just put us in the path, or it could also just put us in a big vortex, and it's hard to get out of those.
I was actually talking about this with a friend, and this is, I mean, being 100% honest, you mentioned being stuck in this kind of sea of everyone's chasing the followers and the likes and all this. And obviously, like, I'm trying to grow the podcast, and part of that is social media and all these things. And I had a guest on the podcast, great guy, and he was a dual sport athlete, played in the MLB, played in the NFL, didn't really work out in either sport. And he talked openly about it on my podcast. He was like, hey, I was probably, if I had just focused on one, I probably would have done a lot better, but I was trying to do this thing, become a dual sport athlete. And after we had talked in the podcast, I went back, edited the video, uploaded it to YouTube. And the title of my video was, I forget the exact title, but it was something like, how he went from NFL bust to, this and that. And I had posted it on my Instagram story, and he replied, and he was like, hey, like, it's really kind of unfair to call me a bust because I was doing this dual sport thing and like this and that. And I looked back and I was like, you know what, man, like, you're right. Like, that isn't the title that I wanted to use. But in my mind, I was like, okay, what title may get more clicks on YouTube? And so I kind of ignored my own values, which at the end of the day is to showcase some incredible stories and journeys to try and get more clicks on YouTube. And in the moment, it was such an important learning experience for me because I was like, wait, like, to your point about the unconscious decision, right? Like, it's like, I didn't even, in the moment, I wasn't even thinking intentionally about it. It just kind of came up, and that's what I went after. And then afterwards, I apologized. And I was like, no, you're right. And I changed it.
And those are the mistakes, obviously, that we do. But again, you learn from them, right? Then we learn from them. So, as we take that into further onto with my story is, college, working, training these kids, doing whatnot. I go back to my high school friends. And again, we got a lot of athletes. We had Peter Ward come down. We had Ron Dugans, Daryl Jackson. So we've had a lot of top guys, the Richard Dumases back in the day, a lot of the Suns guys that were around here, Mike Bibby's, Richard Jefferson's. So I go out with my high school friends, and they're doing some illegal enterprise back and forth to Hawaii, back and forth. And I was asked to bring money back. So I flew over to Hawaii, loaded up my pants with some money, brought it back, and 3 months later, I got the feds at my door, the FBI, the SWAT team, and everybody else. From a decision that I did not consciously think about, right? It was something that happened. And next thing you know, that put me in prison for 30 months, right? I got out of prison. My first day back, I went right back to work where I was at and started training again, right? So it was nothing about a character aspect of it all. It was these series of bad choices that I was making over and over and over again that put me in that position. I got my last DUI. I was with Marion Barber, right? And I was with Eric Green, right? So again, hanging out with some of these people, things happen. So having to go through that rebound, here I am, 17 years later. Now I'm the CEO of my business. So you learn next thing you're going to post something, you'll understand it. Next time someone's going to ask me to bring money back, I'm going to understand it. I ain't going to do that just to give a flavor for somebody else. I got to do what's right for me. And again, like you said, that goes back into your values. And that's one of the things that we do preach here at Move. And one of the things I do put into these kids. Everybody wants to build everything on culture. You hear this all day long, culture, culture, culture. The problem is if you have a whole bunch of bad characters in an environment and you're trying to create culture, you're going to have a bad culture. So we preach character, 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 character all the time.
Going to prison, what was that like?
It was interesting. I lived a life, and I tell these kids here, the suburban white kid is the number one buyer of hip hop music. We all want to be in the hood. We want to have the pants sagging. We want to do the whole thing. I got caught up with all the athletic stuff. There for a while, I was selling the drugs to the guys in Scottsdale and the girls in Scottsdale. I went down that path only because I was always an entertainment guy. I'm always high energy. That's just who I am. That's just my personality. I always bring life to the party. The problem is I got to a period of time where I was even smoking crack, right? And I was on the streets. I was doing bad things. Here I am preaching health. Here I am as a trainer. But I was smoking crack and going playing weekend warrior football games on the weekend. No different than what they used to do back in the 80s, right? They're doing lines of cocaine in the bathroom and then they're going out there playing. Shit, I thought that was normal. Just joking. It was a bad period of time. So when I was coming out of that time, I was doing very well, feeling good. Still trying to make some money, still trying to do some different things. So I ended up bringing the money back from Hawaii and then going to prison. To me, I'll tell you, prison was the best thing because it gave me 30 months to sit back and have a good self-reflection. Just like a kid going to college the first week or 2 weeks when you have nobody around, I was in the period where I could focus on myself and find out really what it is that I needed. It was time to have a plan. Either you're going to come back or you're going to stay out. Either I was going to do extra reps or I was going to cut my reps short. This was a time to really do a lot of self-reflection. And to be honest, it's like going to a new training place or getting traded to a new team. Sometimes you just have to get out of that environment or go to a different environment to succeed and bloom. And that's what it did. To this day, man, I think prison all day long because it's made me who I am, the man I am today.
So prison was ultimately probably the best thing that could have happened to you.
Best thing that could have happened to me. I trained people when I was in there. I was around other athletes. I went to college. I got my master. I got an AA in business marketing, so I used my times wisely. You got to play cards every night. We got to play chess, checkers. It wasn't that bad as they say. I'm just joking. They say it is still pretty bad. But no, we had running races. We had a basketball court. I was in the federal system, so it was a little bit nicer. But again, it was going to like IMG. I had everything that I had over there. It was just a different type of complex.
How would you compare pre-prison Chad and post-prison Chad?
Pre-prison Chad, man, he was fun. He was real fun, right? He'll do everything. He's going to work hard. He's going to do everything he do, even stuff that he probably shouldn't have done. Never was anything intentional. I was never the victim. Chad is never a victim. He's always the person that is responsible for what he does. I'm responsible for stopping smoking crack. I'm responsible for getting myself out of prison. I am responsible for building my new life. My wife, Jackie, we got 3 kids. I'm responsible for building my family. I am the one that has done it. And so Chad nowadays is using everything, all of my personal qualities and characters that I had pre-prison, but now I'm doing them with well-thought choices. Everything that I do, I got a tattoo on my arm right here. It's from Tupac. It says, my every move is a calculated step. Think before you do. So Chad Dunn right now cannot be defeated. That's why I continue to grow and move. I've got this book coming out that I want to help other people out so that they can continue to grow and become the person. And it's simple. It's the self-help has to go back to you. You have to want it, just like in sports.
I see a lot nowadays on the internet, and I mean, I'm terminally online, which is probably bad, but just a lot of this like victim mentality that seems to be going around. And I'm curious your perspective on why do you think it's so prevalent nowadays?
Well, we have an old saying. Our boy Hal Wyatt, he was in the 49ers back in the day in the 80s, and he was the athletic trainer for the 49ers. And he comes in. He's a West Texas guy, cowboy hats, Wranglers on, and a pair of boots. And he's the most irrelevant guy you've ever met. But he speaks the truth. He speaks honesty. If you're looking for sympathy, you can find it in the dictionary between shit and syphilis, right? People want to play the victim mentality because they want sympathy, the poor me things, I'm not the, how come they're getting this $287 million contract and I'm not? How about the NIL that these kids are getting right now when they're going to colleges? How come he's getting 3.5 million over there and he's a 7th year senior and I'm only getting 1 million and I'm a first incoming freshman, it's not fair. It's not fair. I've always said, if you want fair, go play baseball because you got foul or fair. Life is not fair.
And I feel like there's something so powerful too about taking on the personal responsibility, like taking it from a perspective of I am in control and the outcomes that I have in my life are no one else's fault except for my own.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, like I have, people in my life, whatever, they're like, oh, I just really wish I could lose 20 pounds or 30 pounds or whatever. I'm like, you can't.
Okay.
Like, it's not like you have to wait for some magic genie to come down and be like, all right, here's, let me grant you your wish. Here's 30 pounds off. I mean, and I don't know if it's, again, people will always, point to my generation and be like, oh, they're soft, or, I have to listen to my parents be like, oh, I had to walk, the classic story. I had to walk 15 miles through the snow to get to high school, whatever. But I think there is a softening that has happened. And I don't know what the root of it is. I mean, I'm not a, kind of social cultural expert, but there does seem to be this lack of personal responsibility.
There does, and I think it's because, we're only trying to do what's right, and I take everything. And again, I always put diet, politics, and religion, they all in the same category. We know what needs to be done. I don't talk about them, we know. I always go back to compassion. We got to get back to people's hearts. We have to get back to people's hearts. So when we get into people's hearts, we have to have feelings for them, as we're having these feelings, though, we as parents or generation change, we're here to help bring a better society, a better future for our next generation. So we obviously don't want them stressing. We're trying to put them in a less stressful situation. No offense, and I talk about it all the time, but that's why the inner city kids are great athletes, because they're used to being in stressful situations, how I'm going to get my next food, or if I'm going to figure out mom, dad's coming home. And this doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, whatever, if you're Asian. This is just inner city kids. It's stressful. I've been there. I was trying to figure out when can I get my next crack hit, or when if I'm going to elude the cops. It's stressful living in that environment. To make the last free throw to get paid $50 million is not stressful. That's something they want. So I think we do a detriment to our people, to our generations, our kids, by trying to keep them out of stressful situations. We're not doing it intentionally. It's just part of the byproduct. It's part of the byproduct. So how do we do that and still keep everybody going? Is money the answer? We know money is the answer, but I guess the question is what we're really trying to figure out, as we see it nowadays with the payments of everything.
I guess to that point, do you think that doing hard things is how you, I'm trying to be careful in how I phrase this, because I don't want to just ask, like, is doing hard things the key to success? Because it also depends, like, what's your definition of success, right? Is it monetary? Is it right? Or hard? Like, what does it mean to do hard things? But I think for anyone listening to this, myself here, you as well, like, if I tell you go do something hard, I think you have a couple things that pop up right in your mind of things that you would deem to be hard, or a fear that you have.
Yes.
So I think everybody in their heart of hearts knows what it is that they need to do that's difficult. But is the key to do those hard things? Like, do you have to be exposed to those difficult situations and get through them to eventually climb some ladder of success?
Yeah. I mean, we always talk about the cryo. So right now with the cryotherapy that's going around, cold therapy, cool plunge, whatever it is, or now you have the infrareds, the saunas. So there were some studies that we're looking at, and they said that the human body, they stress really on two things the same, and that was hot and cold. So right now in Arizona, 115 degrees, 120 degrees, that's all cool. People have no problem about dealing with the heat. We have to deal with it all day long. But people don't like the cold because we don't get negative temperatures. We don't get freezing temperatures. So go put themselves in a cryo bath, or go put a cryo tank or an ice bath. And what we're doing, we're exposing them to a stressful situation so the fight or flight can happen again. And now the body understands how to respond to a stressful situations, And that doesn't just necessarily have to be for an athlete recovering. You could take somebody off the streets and just have them stand in there for the 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and just endure a stressful situation. If you go to Chicago or so, they're probably not worried about cool plunges, because it feels like Chicago in the wintertime. They probably don't stress about that. But now if you put a dry sauna in there because they're used to the humidity, they'll probably start stressing. Yeah, it's 121 degrees in there. I sat in the sauna, was doing jumping ropes with my sweatsuit on, and I came out there and I survived. I didn't kill over. Perfect. I think that's great. So, that's what we kind of use as the mindset, as a mental aspect, is I try to put you in a stressful situation but a safe one, not running through the streets of, not getting shot at, not doing anything. And we see it all the time, I mean, was it New Mexico State, when they had to do, I think it was 2 years ago with the basketball team where the kid got on the bus with the gun. And, I mean, this happens. It happens, so how do we do this safely, with the generational things? There was that old comment, and I had to pull it up here. It said, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. So it's that generational. It skips at every third or fourth. We have to wait for people to have it all. So, what generation is going to become strong again? That's the key.
Yeah. I heard this great quote from this entrepreneur that I had on the podcast, and he said, not really a quote, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he said, whatever it is that scares you, go do it.
Yep.
And if your life just consists of you actively going and doing the things that scare you, I guarantee you, after some allotted period of time, you'll become a much stronger, better version of yourself.
Yeah.
And
right.
No, I was going to say, like, and that I always remind myself of that whenever I, something that in my mind I deem to be scary. I'm like, okay, let me just go and do it, because I know after I do this, and to your point, like, it's not life or death. And a lot of times in our mind, we make up these like false scenarios of this big scary thing when it's actually not that bad.
Yeah. Sometimes fear will give us an own identity or a different identity of who we really are. If we go in there fearful. I've had that question asked many times. Just about even sports or even in life. What do you fear? And I really don't fear anything. I fear snakes. That's the only thing I still have right now. It's just snakes. If I see them on TV, I'm taking off running. But I put myself, and that's kind of one of these things too. When we talked about why should people listen to this when we start this podcast, is because I put myself in different situations that normal people aren't going to put themselves into, and I've gotten out of them. Fearful is being in the hood going through when the cops are out there surveilling a house and you're going to go pick up drugs or whatever. Fearful is walking through the airport with a whole bunch of money tucked in your pants that you can get through. Stressful is having my girlfriend or my current wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, but stressful is her having her drop me off at the Marshall's building. So I have to go self-surrender for 30 months, not knowing if I'm ever going to see her again. Again, everything's relative. So, I've put myself in different positions. When I talk to my people, my clients, even the kids that I'm bringing up from a young age, I really pride myself on developing kids from the foundation and getting to be a high-level pro athlete, college athlete, or whatever. Because we set the foundation of that, do the right thing, and you can fear, or I always use struggle in the right direction.
I like that, struggle in the right direction.
Yeah.
I wanted to pull this up. I'm trying to find the quote here. It's from, so I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan Holiday and his work, but he studies a lot of he's big into Stoicism and has written a bunch of great books. But he has a quote here from Seneca that says, "We suffer more from imagination than from reality."
Yeah. Yep.
And I heard another great quote from Layla Hermosi, fantastic entrepreneur. And she was like, a lot of times fear is, what was it? I think an inch deep and a mile wide or something like that. Basically, fear, like what we think in our minds is like, it's this huge thing, it's a mile wide, but then when you actually step into it, it's like it's only an inch deep. So it's this not scary at all. And it's interesting, like I've at least discovered just how powerful the mind is and like how important it is to harness it and to use it in a positive light. Because if you don't, if you start spiraling the other way, then things can get pretty hairy.
You think about sports, and we had, I trained Arizona Compass basketball for many years, or 3 years, and we went to the Geico National Championships twice. We played Montverde both times in the semifinals. We lost. But when we play it, you play at a high level, which these guys it's all prep. They're getting ready for school. They got a lot of NBA kids coming out of here. We want to smell blood. I want to see and find that person on that court that's fearful. I was just talking about this morning, this weekend, you saw a bunch of blocked field goals. You saw a bunch of different special teams things that were happening, and I was thinking back on it, nobody really wanted to play special teams. It's just one of those things, snap the ball, kick the ball through, extra points. It's all good. Field goal is pretty much going to be automatic unless the kicker screws up. Our boy, LJ Shelton, back in the day when he was with the Chargers, he was eating a hot dog on the sideline and Darren Sproles ran a kickoff back. And LJ's at the line of scrimmage still chewing on the hot dog, as the ball snapped. So you look at it now like, I'm going to pick that up on tape. I'm going to watch everything. I'm going to find out who's taking that play off nowadays, and it's not really a fear. Now it's just a lackadaisical, but like I'm going to capitalize on that one weak person. And fear is a sign of weakness if you let it. Fear is a sign of weakness if you let it. It can also be kryptonite if you let it. So again, fear, fire, the whole thing is how do you use them?
What would be your advice to someone who is struggling with fear?
I always say fear none, conquer all, right? If you struggle with fear, it's just because a lot of times it's the unknown, and you have to get out there. You have to take that first step. A lot of things that I do, it starts with one in a row, one in a row. I don't like to go jump out of airplanes. Well, you got to go, go jump off the high dive first. But it has to start with one in a row. You have to jump off something. And when you do that, you understand that, hey, it's okay. You do have a safety mechanism on you. I've seen Travis Pastrana jump out of the airplane with no parachute and still make it. Like, I trust people. I trust people. If you trust yourself and if you trust the others around you, I think that your limitations of fear gets down a lot less.
Chad, I want to get back to your story here. So
Yep.
You go to prison for 30 months.
Yep.
You come out, and you mentioned how it was this big transformational thing, best thing that ever could have happened to you. What do you do immediately after prison?
Right after prison, first day I hop on, and again, mind you, I couldn't drive because I had some driver's license stuff. So I get on the city bus. I take the bus to work, and I'm right back working. Doing what I had to do. A lot of times inmates always say, well, I feel like I got to give back time. I've got to put back. I've got to give back to everybody. I just went back there and started with the old same person that I was, not the old same person, but the new person that I was, going there, working hard, doing my job, being a team player. Everything's going great. Now I'm back in my groove. My breaking point came. I had a guy, Eddie King, come in, who was a former BMX racer, mountain bike legend, BMX legend. His brother owns the track in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So reaching out with Eddie, he broke his back in Big Bear in 2007, in 2009 or 10, I want to say. It's been a little bit now. I reached out to him and said, hey, I'd like to work with you if you ever get a chance to come to Phoenix. Paralyzed, fractured T11, T12 spinal cord. Just kind of on the whim, I reached out to him. I'm here to help people. This is what I know. I found out when I was in prison, my true self-identity is somebody that's here to help people. I want to give back and I want to pay it forward. So here was kind of my first thing. Can I help this guy? It's kind of like watching John Elway play or somebody that's an idol. Can I get your glove or something? So that's how it was with Eddie. And sure enough, 3 months afterwards, I get a call from Eddie. He says, hey, I'm moving to Arizona. Let's hook up. So I was like, perfect, man. This is cool. Eddie came in a wheelchair. Very, very, old school 1960s and 70s. I think Eddie right now is 60 years old or so. So everything back in the day, you're all self-taught, right? So Eddie's recovery from paralysis was a lot of self-taught stuff. He had some good hookups with Stephen Murray, who was with the Stay Strong Foundation and the whole X Games community. He relayed what he knew to me, and then I started self-teaching myself, or I started doing some self-taught, self-learning. By doing this, it was trial and error, getting Eddie to do different things, getting him to stand, getting him to turn. But again, there was one thing that I never saw in Eddie, and that was fear. He wasn't a fear of taking that first step. He was actually anxious to do it all. So here I am, and I'm trying to be rehabilitated just coming out of prison. And now I'm helping Eddie take a first step. I'm watching his recovery. And at that point in time, it clicked to me. Hey, I'm rehabilitating them and they rehabilitating me, right? What a perfect team we are. So we started grinding. We started jamming. 354 days after his accident, Eddie was back on a bike riding, right? 365 days, he was back walking with crutches. Not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up, he would always say, right? Which we've heard that. You fall down 8 times, you get up 9, you're going to win. So that was the whole cliche that was actually validated. And so I knew if Eddie could do this, I knew I could do it. And vice versa. I wasn't going to show any of my weakness and tell this guy he's not going to be able to walk. We're here to show people that we can do this. So that was kind of the telltale sign with my new job when I got out, is that I had a different purpose. And like I said, it was more of just, instead of treating the patients, it was more of helping the people.
And when did the entrepreneurial kind of thing start? Like, what were you? Do you think you were always entrepreneurial? Do you think you kind of developed that muscle? Where did that start?
No, I've always been entrepreneurial. It was called See It Done, DUNN, health improvements, right? So I didn't say any sports performance. I didn't say fitness, because it's all about health. It's all about health, even the mental health, right? So along the lines when I first started early on in my career, I still had the same thought process. I still had the same, everything was in there. It was just a little cloudy from all my extracurricular activities. So when I was able to really hone in and I could focus on my target, which was what I wanted my future to be for my wife, for my kids, I became a better person. I became a better trainer. I became both, and really it was more mental. So working with Eddie at the same time, I had a guy that was on fire for about 2.5 minutes, got 60, 70% burns of his body. And then I had a sheriff's posse member that was shot point blank trying to save a Phoenix police officer out here in Phoenix. So I was working with these three guys. I called them my three amigos, right? Paralyzed, gunshot, and a burn. One guy, Eddie, walking out, and I'd never seen Eddie have a bad day. Never, ever had a bad day. So Eddie's walking out. Well, Anthony, my burn guy, would walk in and say he's having a bad day until he saw Eddie. Right? At least you're not paralyzed. So everything, again, was relative. So we're all kind of feeding off each other. Things were just, I had more to give. I really did. I love my guys I'm with, Warren and Mitch. They're my buddies, man. They'll be with me for life. I've worked with them forever, but it was just time that I wanted to branch out and do my own thing. So I had a little bit of kick in the ass from a client, and my wife, who's always my biggest supporter, she was behind me, and she's like, you can do this. You got this. Writing somebody else's paycheck's hard when you don't even have one, right? So that's what the whole thing about being a business owner. Pay for the lights to go on, pay for the building. And I was always told that, but I was excited to make those payments because that was a sign of my transformation. It was a sign of my growth that was happening. So I had no problem doing that. Plus, at the same time, I want to create a good team. I sat down 2016. I developed a plan, went through some angels investors, try to get some money together. Obviously, here's what happens now. If my past hurt me as a convicted felon, it's hard to get money. It was hard to get another job. I was getting turned down. I applied for Dynasplit. That was a medical device company because I thought maybe I could do that, get into medical sales. But I passed every interview until my last one. I got turned down because I was a convicted felon, right? So now there's my own stipulations or stigma that I put on myself. Or also it was a feeling of defeat. I've done all these great things and now I get turned down on my last interview, right? Again, I don't like to be defeated. I've been building myself up and it's all good. So went to the bank. Here, I need a loan. And they said, sorry, but we don't give loans to convicted felons. Right. So now I'm scrambling around. I have to do what I have to do. Thankfully, my last resort, I went to my parents and my parents said, we got you. We got you. We'll believe in you. Obviously, payback type kind of thing. So I borrowed some money from my parents. We got Move up and running, $160,000, opened up this place. I thought I had it all under control, had a nice business plan, but business plans are almost like game plans or training programs. They got to be fluid. They're not going to be fixed, My wife wasn't supposed to be working with me. She's a bartender and she's supposed to be making all the other income, but I needed her to be around me. So now we take both of our incomes and we put them into one place. Not good. We weren't busy enough. I think our first day I made $75. I'm looking at myself like, man, are you sure this is the right thing to do? But with anything else, keep grinding, buddy. Keep grinding.
What motivated you to stay consistent? And the reason I ask is because I hear all the time with business advice or even growing a podcast, it's just like, stay consistent, just be consistent. And my thesis is like, everybody needs something that motivates them. Yes. And it could be, and at the end of the day, we spoke about looking inwards and being intentional. I think you need to be true to yourself about what motivates you.
Yes.
And maybe during a season of your life, it's money. And that's like, you're just like, I want to make as much money as I can. If you are being true to yourself and money really is that motivation, that burning motivation that will get you up in the morning and that will get you to do the work, then lean into that. And I hate when people say like, oh no, you should be motivated by this. And I'm like, yes, it's great to be motivated by perhaps other things that are more meaningful than money, but also who are you to say that money is more meaningful or less meaningful? Like it's all very dependent on the person. So And I joked around about this on my live stream. I'm like, listen, if your girlfriend just broke up with you and you're motivated by this desire to go and prove her wrong and prove that you're this great, entrepreneur and you make all this money, great, lean into that. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is going and doing the thing.
Yes.
Sitting down, recording the podcast, making the clips, putting it on YouTube, opening up your business, paying the rent, showing up every single day. So I've just been on this huge motivation kick recently, I guess. And honestly, it starts with me and like understanding what motivates me. So I'm curious to hear kind of what motivated you, especially in the beginning when times were maybe a little tough.
Yeah. As I mentioned, my wife, with the 3 kids, she was a single mom with 3 kids, I've got a great family, everything was great, growing up, and my mom and dad are still married and whatever. But like, I hate to see people struggle. And I knew she was the one. I told her from day one I was going to marry her. Right? I told her that. So my motivation was to be a provider for her and her kids. That was when I got out of prison. Now we there was a period in time in prison that we were not together because she had to live her own life. She's like, I didn't put myself there, you did. And it was hard to come up and see me and leave me, right? So again, the mental anguish is not just on the inmate, it's also on the significant other, you know. It's not just on the athlete. A lot of stuff is also on the coach, you know. The coaches, you know, they made him a bad call. Maybe the coach is going to go beat himself up afterwards. You know, not just the athlete, the kicker that missed the field goal, but maybe the coach says, "Man, we should have." You know, there's always both sides of everything. So at that point in time, you know, family was my biggest thing. That was my major motivator. When I opened up Move, obviously, you know, you talk about money. I had an old friend racing BMX bikes. His dad was the best, you know, Mr. Ken Reyna. And, you know, the whole thing, money don't buy you happiness. He would always say, bullshit. If you have money, you're happy. I'm telling you. And again, it's the whole thing of how you use the money. But at the end of the day, really what we're looking for is we are looking for money. Okay. How you use that. There's a lot of philanthropists that give it back. There's a lot of donations, the NIL. I've got the old alumni and I got the new alumni in all these universities, right? For me, even now, to my motivation to keep the doors open at Move, to be able to do these podcasts, to be able to reach out, to be able to get my book out there, I am trying to bring in as much money as I can so that way I can help pay and support my team. I've got my employees. I've got 7 employees that work with me. My kids are all grown. They out of the house, right? I need to make sure my employees are taken care of and my family's taken care of. That is my drive every day, is to make sure that I can make sure that, you know, I've got one that he just moved out here from New York. He's from Australia, a tennis player. He's got a little baby on the way. I want to make sure that he has enough money to be able to pay his kids, you know, his kids' food. You know, my boy Kane that works with me, my right-hand man. I had a job. I had a job with Rehab Plus, and I told these guys from the very beginning, I don't want you to think that this is a dead-end job. I'm here to give you guys a career, right? So everybody that works for us, we give them a career.
I heard this on the podcast. Some millionaire came on this one podcast and he was like, "Oh, you know, money doesn't buy you happiness, this and that." And then the host was like, "Great, just give me all your money then."
Sure.
If money doesn't buy happiness, in all seriousness, I do think like money solves all your money problems, right? And I think there's a lot of money problems out there, right? Like health is a big one. If you have money, you can hire a private chef. You can get all the latest imaging technology, blood work, whatever done, right? Like there, I mean, without going into it all, there's so much that you can do for your own health, right? You can buy fun to an extent, right? Go travel if that's your thing, or if you love going to sports games, go sit courtside at whatever game you want to go to the Super Bowl, right? So I think money solves all your money problems. Now, is money gonna bring your family back together? Is money gonna, maybe create these like meaningful relationships that also, bring us a lot of happiness? Probably not, but it solves all your money issues. And I think people are, I think it's almost like one of those taboo things that people just don't want to admit. And I
know, but when they down to that last dollar, shit. When I was in prison, there was very few people that had money in there. Right, and they couldn't even eat. They couldn't order from the commissary. They couldn't get a bar of deodorant. They couldn't get the headphones that they needed. So when everything's taken away from you, you do need money. Trust me, you do need money because you have to start building a foundation. Now again, how much do we need to compile? I guess that's the big question is How much is too much? You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, the fundamentals of it all. Don't be fooled by the dollar.
I have to ask, any like prison stories that come to mind that you want to share? That stick out?
Yeah, I've got some. I mean, the good ones. Just from let's talk about the sports side of everything, right? The sports side of everything. There's a lot of athletes that get caught up. We're talking inner city. The basketball games that I saw in there was like going to a Power 5 conference basketball game. We had a whole court in there. We had basketball leagues, the whole thing. It was legit. On the weekends, we'd have big man races. So it's a lot of the heavy. We'd take the obese guys and we'd have them run the soccer field. So we'd have like 100-yard sprints, right? We're betting on them, right? They're still the same thing. We got FanDuel inside. Somebody's betting the tuna. Somebody's betting some stamps, which are the things, a commodity, So the whole thing, it's a whole nother environment inside. We were betting, you're gambling. You got basketball, you got sports. We had a weight pile, But I think the biggest thing, is just the difference of people that are in there. You're going to meet a whole bunch of different people, Two Shorts, the right-hand man Frog was back in the day. He was in there with us. I had the guy that was going postal, the old man that went into the post office and I think it was the 60s or whatever and blew it up. He was in there with us. So it was different. It was different, But the biggest thing is the people that you meet. I got a buddy of mine that's still friends to this day. His name's Robbie. I met him in there. I left and he was in there for another 12 years. Another 12 years. Now again, he did 19 and a half years. It was some drug stuff out of Canada. But with this is, it's like anything else. He didn't bother nobody. He did his own time. He kept the peace with everything, and this is not like fighting violent stuff, but just something simple over food in the kitchen, right? They changed some different things. They had the movement in the yard was different, and everybody started boycotting. Well, they thought that Robbie might have been point of it all. So without any questions, he's been at this facility now for about 12 years or 14 years, I think it was at this time. They pick him up, they put him in a bus, and they move him to Leavenworth, Kansas, in the USP, is called the hot house or the sweat box. So the people that you meet in there, there's a lot of good ones. A lot of gambling. A lot of gambling goes on. That's the biggest thing. A lot of gambling. Because again, you take the behavior of the outside and you put them on the inside. There's still the things that fed their entertainment. The biggest thing that I'll leave you with prison that I learned from prison, which I don't watch the TV nowadays. I call it a dummy box. I'll do YouTube stuff. I'll do it, but the TV is just it's a trap. I have never seen as many fights as I've seen in prison over the TV. You think sitting at home with your husband or wife, and flipping over the channels is bad. But everybody wants to watch different sports, or they want to watch soccer instead of football, or they want to listen to the rap shows instead of watching Jerry Springer. The biggest thing, don't watch the TV. Right? It's the same thing about being in the outsides.
Interesting. That's fun.
Sports season with the fastest. The time from in prison, everybody loved when football season came around because the time went so fast because they betting on it. Fantasy football is going down. When that there's that little dry period, what is it, 2 to 3 months when there is no sports going on? That felt like eternity.
Listen, even when you're not in prison, that time feels like an eternity.
Right. Yep.
That is the dry season of sports. Those are the dog days of summer. Yeah, it's rough. Especially if it's not like an Olympic year or or like the World Cup or something like this past summer. Like there was literally nothing on, like nothing sport. I mean, I'm not a huge baseball guy, so I don't really watch the MLB. But dude, I was like, damn, man, like there's nothing to do. And like you want to get with your boys and like for me, like hanging out with my friends, it's like, oh, we watch like a football game or we watch like a basketball game or something and just grab a couple beers, and do something chill. So, any particular transformations? You mentioned a couple, the burn victim and then Eddie with the spinal injury. Any other transformations or athletes that you've helped that stick out?
I've got one right now. And he's currently in doing some rehab on an ACL. This kid here is just like, when you talk about resilient, when you talk about tough, when you talk about adversity, if you, as a interviewer, as a host, as a coach, just as whatever, this guy's going to stick out. So his name's Trey Hesser. He's a swimmer, went to the Olympic trials. I had two swimmers last year that went to the Olympic trials. He was one of them. He's a 800 meters freestyle swimmer. Number one recruit in the country. He has been dealing with for his whole life seizures. So he has epilepsy, not medicated at the time. So he would be swimming anytime he goes into a meet, stressful situations. A lot of times it would be about semifinals. He would have the seizure where he would lock up in the pool or he would lock up afterwards. And then that drains all the energy, which would allow him not to swim at his best or optimal performance the next day of the meet. So we worked with that. We got a lot of that under control, worked on some stress situations on how to handle it. He's a very, very savant himself on knowing his body. So we worked with Trey, went to the Olympic trials. He got first in his heat. I think he got 8th overall. Didn't make the Olympic team. But you know what? For a 19-year-old kid, man, this is just awesome. Somebody overcoming epilepsy, just, again, defying the odds. He comes back. He's going to the University of California to go swim. He's on a scholarship over there. He calls me after a couple weeks there and he says, "Hey, coach, something's wrong with my neck. It's hurting me." Now, mind you, he's a homeschool kid. Everything was focused on swimming when he's here. Now he's sleeping in a dorm bed. You're away from mom and dad. Things are going to get a little tough. So I gave him some stretches to do. I gave him some exercises to do. He called me about a week later. He says, "Coach, something's wrong. I was at the starter block and I just fell in the water." Right? my arm kind of went limp and my arm just kind of went numb. So I said, well, obviously you got to get some imaging. Let's get an MRI. Let's get your neck looked at or whatever. So he went down, got an MRI, and they said, you need to go to the University of San Francisco Hospital right now. You have a tumor in your neck. So he has what's called Ewing sarcoma, bone cancer. Caucasian, late teens, early 20s, high-level athletes or people that are in shape has a better chance of getting this. Normally it's in a limb like an arm or a leg. Unfortunately for him, it came back and it's in his neck, or it came and it's in his neck. Get a plan of care together. He comes out here to Mayo Hospital. Swimming's put on hold. You go from Olympic swimmer to now not swimming at all, not even knowing if you might be able to swim again. Might not even know if you're going to make it. Right? This is a very aggressive cancer. They come up with a plan. He does 17 rounds of chemo, and then he's got to do 31 rounds of radiation. I talked to him during the whole time. At the very beginning of his chemo, he says, man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Every day's great. Positive mindset every way. Never once did I see him fall into that vortex, that negativity. I always talk about being optimistic. Everything that I do, I'm very, very, very optimistic. That's why fear is not a thing for me, because I know that I'm going to overcome that situation. I just know that because I don't look at anything with a negative side. I don't look at it as a pessimistic side. Trey had not either. You know, I hope I taught him that, but I know I didn't teach him that. Just that's how he is as a person. Right? So as part of the whole program, Mayo, they give him a catalog and he gets to buy this, whatever toy he wants. You're going through this chemo, this tough process. So he buys one of those big wheels that he's on. You see people cruising down the beach or the boardwalk, and they're cruising around on those. His dad fell on the big wheel and broke his collarbone. I told Trey, don't even jeopardize your health. You're going through chemo. You're doing all this. Do not do that, right? Let your dad learn. He's like, no, my dad's just a jackass. He fell. I ride it better than my dad. I'm like, I understand, but we know situations happen, right? So sure enough, Trey gets to ring the bell. Cancer, 17 rounds of chemo. Boom, he's done for. Starts into his radiation. Second week of radiation, he's on his big wheel. He falls and tears his ACL. So now he's got go through radiation, and who knows with the cancer, surgeries, whatever. I thought this would be a setback mentally, but man, optimistic as can be. That's okay. I'll be able to get through this as well. So currently, Trey's rang the bell for chemotherapy. He's rang the bell for his radiation. He's almost 12 weeks post-op. Everything's looking good. He's getting back. He's jamming. And I asked him the other day, I said, Trey, how you coming? How's your ACL recovery coming for you mentally, physically, everything else? He says, well, it's like life. There's a lot of ups and downs, but at the end, I know I'm going to be okay. I mean, how can you not, right? How can you not? So, transformations, every day I got some, but there's always somebody special that I have here. And again, when you have somebody like that as an athlete that's working next to an NBA kid, or, I just said I got Bruce Branch. He just went to Prolific. They just moved to Florida, Fort Lauderdale. So he's the number one basketball player in the class of 2027. When he's working out next to Trey and he sees Trey not giving up and giving it every rep, that every effort, every 100%, it's very motivating for my athletes to be able to work in that environment. And that's what we've created at Move. I've got, catastrophic injury patients coming back. I've got normal sports medicine stuff, and then again, we have just the normal population. So here what we've done is we created a big environment. And we talked about that earlier, environments who you're around.
It's honestly so inspiring, and I hope it's equally inspiring for the audience to hear stories like that, because I think, myself included, I fall into this trap. One small thing goes wrong. Oh, they messed up my Starbucks order, or this one minor inconvenience happened to me, and it's like, oh my God, the day is ruined. Everything sucks. My life is so terrible. And I mean, I think partly it's the culture that we live in, right? Like you can do anything you ever want on your phone. You don't have to step out to order groceries anymore. You can just Instacart it. You can order food to your house. You have all the entertainment that you'd ever want on the internet, on your TV. So it's a convenience culture that we've kind of established with the apps and with technology and all that. But hearing stories like that, not only is it inspiring, but it forces people to look back on their own lives and be like, okay, like, what am I complaining about? Like, I'm over here complaining about this minor thing that may have happened. Meanwhile, here's this guy that's going through chemo that just tore his ACL, and he's waking up with a smile on his face and saying, life's great. Let's get after it. Let's go seize the day. So it's inspiring.
It is. And that's, when you walk in, move right on the front wall. I have mind over virtual everything. I say there's only two things that can stop you, and that's faith and nature. Now, faith without the religion and putting that out there, you know what I mean? I say that to one of my guys. He said, no, God's the other one too. But I say faith. Faith is faith in yourself. You're the only person that can stop you. I've seen it in prison. I've seen it in sports. I've seen it in just training. I've seen it in recovery. The ones that put the limitations on themselves are the ones that don't succeed. You have to have faith in yourself. The other thing is just natural disasters. It could be the hurricanes. It could be the fires. It could be cancers. It could be, whatever. I had a lady today I was talking to. She's 82 years old. Her husband was a badass, and I guess has gone through all the wars and everything else. He passed away from West Nile virus, right? Just a freak. She was like a little tiny mosquito put him down, And so you just think about these things, and she's like, I had to go through my asthma when I was in Alabama. They told me if I wasn't cured and I wasn't out of here by the age of 20, I probably wouldn't be living longer. So I moved to Arizona. I got better weather where it wasn't so humid. I did that so that I could live my life with my husband. And now he passes away to West Nile virus with a mosquito. And you're like, man, again, she's the sweetest lady, and she didn't have no pride. She says, but you know what? There's a reason why this all happens, and I've got to continue with that reason. And I am the reason, and I agreed with her. You are the reason. Each one of us are the reason. We're the reason we win the games. We're the reason we show up for practices. We're the reason why we stay consistent doing our podcast. I'm the reason why I show up every day to work. I want to make sure that I'm the reason. And if we all lead by example, I think our community is going to be a better one in the whole anyways.
That's very well put. I did want to ask you about mind over virtually everything, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I know that's one of your mottos.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this podcast, you mentioned that there's certain codes that you live your life by. I was hoping you could maybe share some of those codes.
Yeah. Well, so obviously we really do. We talk about the self-identity, and the biggest thing is self-identity. That's the biggest thing that I think everybody has to get into. When you get to know yourself and you know who you are, you get to know everything that you get to do and what you stand for. That's when everything becomes important to you. For instance, I'll give you here one of my first codes that I have. You are in control of creating your own identity, and that goes back into self-reflection. That goes back into self-responsibility. That goes into everything that you have. When we talked about those choices, you talked about the conscious choices. We talked about the subconscious choices. One of my other codes that I have is that when you master the power of choice, that you take control of your life. Trey could choose to let chemo take over. I could choose to let my record take over. I could let somebody say, well, you're a convicted felon or whatever. But that's not who I am. We are all here, whether it be in life, even in relationships. I talk about relationships. There's a lot of times that we're so quick to leave. People get divorces. We're quick to run. You got to put the time in. It's going to be a fight. You're going to have to know each other. You're going to have to go through some disadvantages. You're going to have to go through some adversity. There's going to be some yelling, arguing. But at the end of the day, are you there to love each other? And hopefully that's what you have. Hopefully that's what you have. And it's all built off trust. Everything's built off trust, but it's trust in yourself to be able to be the best person for your significant other, your coach, your teammate, your employees. Where I'm at in my life, and what I've gone through is I trust everything that I do because I'm the one making that decision. I don't relate on anybody. The alcoholics, and it's touchy with this one because I don't like to use the word addiction at all. From drug addicts to alcoholics or even gambling addicts, now that we have, with all the fan duels and the sports stuff, you hear this all day long. If you have a gambling addiction, I had to go to one class when I got out of prison. It was my last counseling class I had to go to. And everyone before, they told you you're an alcoholic, you're a drug addict, you're a gambling addict, whatever. And this guy specifically said, he says, you guys not addicts, you're never going to hear me use the word addict. He says, we all make bad choices. If you don't want a haircut, don't go to the barbershop. But you chose to go there. So you're probably going to get the haircut. So for me, at the same time, it boils down to choices. And that's what I've built everything with. It's my choice to come here, take care of my employees. I'm not looking for them to take care of me. They're just a component to me. It's my job to take care of my family. It's my job to do what I need to. And as long as I do that and we all take care of each other, we're going to be perfect.
I can't believe that we've been recording for the last hour and 5 minutes. It certainly has not felt that way because I've enjoyed this conversation, getting to know you, Chad, and your story and your journey. Like I said, before we started recording, I was super excited to talk to you because I think a lot of people can find a lot of inspiration and your journey and how you're able to rebuild yourself. You do have a book coming out that I'm excited for. So I was hoping you could give us a little sneak peek of what the book's about.
Yeah, so the book, it's 10 codes to transform your life. I just gave you 2 of them. I gave you 2 of them, right? But there's 8 other good ones in there. I've got a lot of self. This is proven methods because I've done it. Okay, we've looked for self-help everywhere else. We've been to classes. We've been to everywhere. But the one place that we haven't been is we haven't been to the mirror. You have to look at yourself. You are the one that's got to change. So in this book, I try to simplify it for everybody that's looked for all the help somewhere else but hasn't been able to change their life. And it's not just about getting in trouble. It's also just about overcoming adversity or becoming a better athlete. You know, it touches on something for everybody in there. So it's the 10 codes to transform your life. Mind over virtual everything is the name of it. Mind over virtual everything. And if you notice, our logo, our gym's called Move. And somebody asked me, what does MOVE stand for? And it came back to Eddie. You know, Eddie's not here to get stronger. Eddie's not here to stretch. Eddie's not here to balance. Eddie's just here to move. In order to get him better in life, he's got to move. So that's how I came up with MOVE. But one day I was driving down the street and I was sitting thinking, like, what could be a good acronym be for this, or what was it? And it popped in my head, mind over virtual everything. It's a mindset. So that's how the 2 go together. The logo is actually a handicapped person in motion, or it's actually also an athlete in motion. So we've taken that and we've branded that. And so, you know, we have all the trade rights and everything, but it's so the word MOVE with the italicized O. So mind over virtual everything is the title of the book. 10 codes to transform your life. It's going to be out October 28th is when it really hits the store, hits Amazon. So it'll be available on Amazon, hardback, paperback. It's going to be out there. I'm using that just to be able to reach out. I want to be able to give back to people. And I want to be able to give my codes when it seems helpless or you seem helpless. You have to learn to ignore the noise internally and externally. And through this book and through the words that I put on these pages, I want to help people out, and I hope that they're able to follow.
Love that. I'm excited for it. I'll definitely be picking up a copy. And I have to shoot you an email on my thoughts after I read it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's it's a great. I've had everyone from professional athletes. So obviously I had to do my advanced read of it all. So I've got some professional athletes. I've got some coaches. Everything came back and they're like, man, this is a great book. You know, even had a probation officer read it and give me a review. So, you know, it comes from all levels, and a police officer So again, I want to try to bring the whole, it's about life. It's about life, not just about sports, not just about physical health, not just about mental health, because I know everybody's locked onto the mental health lot. Really though, it's just about just being the best person that you can be.
Yeah. Chad, I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Nick,
this has been fantastic getting to know you, man.
Yep.
But real quick, before we sign off, where can people find more about you and your work?
Yeah, so if our work, you can go to moveperformance.com. You can see all the fun that goes inside the facility, the clinic, mind over virtual everything, a little bit of the short story on the book that's coming out, a little bit about me. Instagram, I've got Chad Dunn 22 and Move Performance as well. So Instagram, Twitter is the same thing, Chad Dunn 22, Move Performance. You can find us there. Moveperformance.com is the website.
Love it. Chad, thanks so much for your time, man.
Nick, I appreciate you having me. Thank you and good luck. Keep jamming.
Thanks.
Yep. Appreciate you.